After our wedding, my husband declared that his family would be joining us on our honeymoon trip to Bali, except they planned to go without me. So, in a spontaneous decision, I took off to Hawaii alone, without informing them. Now, my husband's mother is irate because I wasn't home during what has turned into an episode straight from a soap opera. To give you some background, I've always had the tendency to put others first. Growing up as the eldest daughter in a conservative family, I learned early on to prioritize everyone else's needs. My parents were loving yet firm, and they set high expectations for me. I was the first in my family to attend college and secure a good job, and recently, I became the first to get married. My parents' pride weighed heavily on me, intensifying their expectations. I met Henry, a 27-year-old charming and seemingly perfect partner, nearly 4 years ago, through mutual friends. Initially, I admired how important his family was to him, as I came from a similarly close-knit family. However, it soon became evident that Henry's family dynamics were more intrusive than supportive. They were deeply involved in every aspect of his life, a trait I initially mistook for closeness. As our relationship progressed, I noticed that Henry often prioritized his family over us. Our plans would frequently be canceled last minute if his family needed him. Despite the red flags, I believed that marriage would change our dynamics. I thought that once we were married, Henry would start putting our relationship first. Unfortunately, I was mistaken. Our wedding felt more like a production controlled by his family than a celebration of our union. Every detail, from the guest list to the decorations, was influenced by them. I had dreamed of a wedding that celebrated our love, but it felt overshadowed by his family's involvement. Despite my frustrations, I remained hopeful about our honeymoon. It was meant to be a chance for us to unwind and enjoy each other's company. We had planned 5 weeks in Bali, a destination I agreed to after Henry suggested it, knowing his family had enjoyed their previous visits there. I envisioned romantic beach days, temple explorations, and dinners under the stars. Yet, nothing went as planned. When the unexpected twist of his family planning to go without me arose, I felt sidelined and treated more like an accessory than a partner. My decision to escape to Hawaii was born out of a need to reclaim some autonomy in my life, which has since ignited further drama. This situation has illuminated the stark reality that my new marriage may require more assertive boundaries than I ever anticipated. The morning following our wedding, I had imagined a typical post-wedding scenario where we'd catch a late flight for our honeymoon. However, my husband, Henry, seemed a bit off since the previous evening. I attributed his behavior to exhaustion from the wedding festivities. As I was packing, Henry requested a chat. Although it seemed strange, I didn't think much of it and agreed. We sat in our living room, where he shared startling news. He revealed that his family had transformed our honeymoon into a family trip. Not only would his parents, siblings, and a few cousins be going, but they also decided I shouldn't join them. Now that I was part of the family, they expected me to stay behind to manage household duties while they enjoyed themselves overseas. I searched Henry's face for any sign of understanding about how unfair and hurtful his words were, but he appeared clueless, even slightly smiling. He thought it was an excellent chance for me to bond with his family and prove my dedication. He reassured me we could always take a trip later, but for now, this was the family's wish. At that moment, I recognized the scenario as part of a larger pattern of disregard and control in our relationship. Accepting this arrangement would set a precedent for being marginalized and disrespected. However, instead of showing my frustration, I took a deep breath, smiled, and told Henry the first respected their decision. He thanked me for my understanding and promised to make it up to me later. While Henry continued packing, I excused myself to the bedroom, closed the door, and allowed myself to process everything. I fought back tears, determined to make a decision for myself that valued my dignity and self-respect. It then occurred to me that my parents owned a lovely vacation home in Hawaii, initially offered to us for our honeymoon. Although Henry had preferred Bali for its exotic appeal, Hawaii now seemed like the perfect retreat for me. I immediately booked a last-minute flight to Maui for that evening, packed my bags, and planned my departure without informing Henry or his family. I left a note for Henry on the kitchen counter, explaining that since he would be in Bali, I would take care of my own plans. I wished him a pleasant trip and suggested we could discuss things upon our return. Leaving the note behind, I grabbed my luggage and headed to the airport, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, but also an intense sense of freedom. For the first time in a long while, I was prioritizing my happiness and well-being. Arriving at my parents' vacation home, I was welcomed by the calming sound of waves and the gentle breeze rustling through the palm trees. The house, with its cozy ambience and stunning ocean views, felt like a sanctuary. Over the next 3 weeks, I indulged in spa treatments, savored local dishes, and even started surfing lessons, fulfilling a lifelong dream. This time became a period of reflection and joy, a stark contrast to the situation I had left behind. During my time away, I engaged in profound introspection, reflecting on my relationship with Henry, from our beginnings to the troubled state we found ourselves in. It dawned on me that in my attempts to integrate into his life and gain his family's approval, I had neglected my own needs and desires. I overlooked numerous red flags and sacrificed my personal boundaries, all for the sake of love and acceptance. This realization struck me as both painful and liberating. It became clear that I deserved more than to be an afterthought in my own marriage. I deserved a partner who would respect me, value my emotions, and make our relationship a priority. I resolved that if Henry could not meet these fundamental needs, I would be better off without him. As my retreat in Hawaii concluded, I felt rejuvenated and at peace with my decision. I packed my bags, ready to face the challenges at home with a newfound resolve to stand up for myself. Upon my return, I turned on my phone to discover numerous messages and missed calls from Henry and his family. Instead of concern, there was anger and frustration over my absence and the duties they expected of me. Henry's messages grew increasingly hostile, and his family members varied from puzzled to outright accusatory. Henry's mother criticized me sharply, chiding me for missing a vital chance to cement my role as a daughter-in-law and expressing their collective disappointment. My sister-in-law echoed this sentiment, accusing me of disrespecting their family traditions and making derogatory remarks about my own family. These messages filled me with anger, but they also clarified that my decision to stand up for myself was correct. In response, I instructed my parents to avoid contact with Henry and his family for now. I chose not to burden them with the details of the situation and have since been staying with a friend, contemplating my next steps. Henry insists I return home and apologize, promising we could resolve our issues if I just prioritized family. However, after everything that has transpired, I am uncertain if I want to return to that environment. So, I turn to you, Reddit. Am I wrong for choosing to take a personal vacation instead of staying home to manage household chores while my husband joined his family on a trip during our honeymoon? Henry contacted me once more, his tone more urgent than before. He revealed that his family was pressuring him to settle the issue, even offering their forgiveness if I apologized. The audacity of their demand was shocking. What were they forgiving me for? Was it for refusing to yield to their unreasonable expectations, or for finally prioritizing my own happiness? I told Henry the first needed time to process everything and ended the call to avoid saying something I might regret. During this turbulent period, I've been staying with a friend who has been incredibly supportive. She reinforces daily that I deserve respect and should never have to justify my worth, especially not to a family that treats me more like a servant than a family member. We've spent countless hours discussing the situation, and her support has helped me see things more clearly. After speaking with Henry, I contacted my parents who were appalled by the developments. My mother, initially thrilled about the wedding, was heartbroken, and my father was furious. They've both offered unwavering support and even suggested I come home for a while to clear my mind, a tempting offer given the continuous onslaught of messages from Henry and his relatives. Initially, he tried to guilt-trip me, reminiscing about our vows and questioning whether I wanted to discard our relationship over a misunderstanding. When that failed, he claimed that everything would be forgiven if I just returned. It's as though he's completely lost sight of the core issue. I've been infuriated, particularly with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who have escalated their harassment. They've gone so far as to create a spectacle at my parents' house, roping in the neighbors and slandering my parents' names, suggesting they had a part in tarnishing their family's reputation. This debacle left the neighborhood abuzz, and my mother distraught. All this has forced me to reconsider what I've gotten myself into. Is my future with Henry meant to be an endless cycle of chores and seeking approval from his ungrateful and offensive family? The thought of enduring this for the rest of my life is utterly distressing. After that incident, I couldn't remain silent any longer. I called Henry and made it clear that there would be no apologies from my side to any of his family members. Given their actions towards me and my family, they should be the ones seeking forgiveness. I was seething with anger as I laid out my feelings unequivocally. I reached out and shared my feelings, and it was clear from his reaction that he was surprised by the firmness in my voice. He began to speak, likely attempting a feeble explanation for their actions, but I didn't let him finish. I made it clear that it was more crucial for him to mend the ongoing feud than for me, as I owed nothing to him or his family. However, if he chose their side over mine, he would lose me. I ended the call before he could reply, my hands shaking from a blend of anger and adrenaline, no longer able to endure his senseless justifications. Each time he tried to clarify, it only highlighted his lack of understanding or concern for my viewpoint. How could he expect me to remain in a situation where my feelings and needs were consistently overlooked? Since that conversation, I've been reflecting deeply on what to do next. The more I think about our relationship, the more I realize how lopsided it has been. I've always been the one making concessions, going out of my way to maintain harmony. But I'm finished with putting others first at the expense of my happiness. I'm ready to take a stand for myself, even though I know challenging times lie ahead. I finally feel like I'm seizing control of my destiny. Thank you, Reddit, for the encouragement I desperately needed, but didn't know I possessed. Your supportive messages and insights have been incredibly enlightening. I had been so consumed with pleasing everyone else that I neglected my self-worth. Your comments have reminded me that I deserve better, and I'm starting to truly believe it. This community has empowered me to assert myself, and I'm profoundly grateful for that. I've moved back in with my parents temporarily. There were 3 reasons for this decision. Firstly, I felt I had overstayed my welcome at my friend's home, despite her reassurances to stay longer. Secondly, I wanted to be there for my parents in case Henry's family caused more trouble. Hopefully, there won't be a need, but experience has taught me to expect the unexpected. Returning home brought a sense of comfort and familiarity, as if I was reclaiming part of myself lost in the recent chaos. My parents were relieved to see me, and it was comforting to be with people who genuinely cared for me without any hidden agendas. As I was settling into this new normal, something unexpected occurred. Mila, Henry's ex-girlfriend, reached out to me through a mutual acquaintance. Initially, I was hesitant, wondering about her motives, but her intent soon became clear. She had learned about my situation and offered her support. We exchanged messages and met for coffee. Talking to Mila was like looking into a mirror. Her experiences with Henry eerily mirrored my own. As we shared our stories, I felt a growing sense of solidarity and understanding. She initially saw him as a dedicated family man, deeply devoted to his relatives, much like I had. She admired his strong family bonds. However, as time passed, a pattern emerged where every outing they planned was somehow intruded upon by a family member, never allowing them any privacy. A memorable instance was when they had scheduled a weekend away, eagerly anticipated by Mila, only to be thwarted at the last minute because Henry's mother suddenly fell ill. Concerned, they took her to the doctor, only to find she was perfectly healthy. It seemed as though she had fabricated her illness to prevent their trip. This incident was a turning point for Mila, as she began to see that their closeness was not just familial bonding but a form of manipulative control. Moreover, Mila felt out of place at family dinners where, despite being a guest, she was expected to clean and do dishes, a task not typically expected of guests. This struck me as unusual, as guests are generally treated with hospitality, not tasked as if they were earning their keep. Mila shared how demeaning it felt, particularly because Henry never intervened or offered to help. He simply accepted it as normal. Overwhelmed, Mila attempted to discuss setting boundaries with Henry, hoping for his understanding, but he dismissed her feelings, insisting she wasn't trying hard enough to integrate into his family-centric life. As I listened to her, I felt validated in my own experiences. Mila's struggles mirrored mine, revealing a pattern in Henry's behavior, drawing women into his life only to let his family's overpowering expectations suffocate them. The more we talked, the clearer it became that my situation would not improve if I stayed. Henry's would always prioritize his family over our relationship, no matter how unreasonable their demands. Feeling a mix of relief, anger, sadness, but most importantly, clarity, I wasn't overreacting. This was a recurring issue, and Henry was unlikely to change. After discussing with my supportive parents, they reassured me that I deserved better than to stay in a marriage where I felt constantly disrespected. Mila's story was the catalyst I needed to firmly decide that leaving was the right choice. Deciding to pursue a divorce was a profoundly difficult choice, but necessary for my well-being. Staying married meant constantly being deprioritized behind a family that showed little regard for me. After much reflection and discussions with my close friend Mila, as well as heartfelt conversations with my parents, I resolved to move forward. My lawyer would soon notify my husband, Henry, about my decision. Despite the ongoing challenges, I attended a birthday celebration for a dear friend who supported me immensely during these trying times. Initially, I hesitated, fearing judgment and whispers about my quick marriage and subsequent decision to divorce. However, I realized hiding would only prolong my distress. The party started well, with friends showing understanding and support, allowing me to relax and momentarily enjoy normalcy. Unexpectedly, Henry appeared at the event, visibly angry. His sudden presence shocked me, and he immediately confronted me, causing a scene. He accused me of betraying our marriage, despite his own passive role during the conflicts with his family. I refused to engage in a detailed discussion at the party and attempted to leave to avoid further conflict, but he persisted, following me and escalating the situation with his loud and erratic behavior. At the time when I thought things couldn't possibly become any worse, a situation unfolded at the party that escalated quickly. One of the guests, sensing my discomfort, intervened to defend me. He calmly yet assertively asked Henry to leave me alone. This action, however, triggered a shocking reaction from Henry. He exploded in anger, wildly accusing me of cheating on him and suggesting that my push for a divorce was because I was involved in an affair. His accusations were so ludicrous and out of the blue that I was momentarily speechless. Henry's anger didn't stop there. It spiraled out of control. He confronted the man who had come to my aid, aggressively getting in his face and accusing us of having an affair. The scene was disturbing. It was as if a switch had flipped in Henry's mind, transforming him from merely upset to entirely irrational and aggressive. I was taken aback. Henry knew I hardly knew this man, merely a friend of a friend, someone I had barely spoken to prior to that evening. Yet, none of that mattered in his enraged state. His behavior became erratic and unhinged, frightening everyone around, including myself. The party ground to a halt as several people intervened to prevent the situation from becoming violent. My friend was in tears, apologizing for a debacle she had no hand in causing, and the man who had stood up for me attempted to pacify Henry, even as he faced baseless allegations. Eventually, some guests managed to escort Henry out, but not before he hurled one last accusation at me, his face a mask of anger and despair, proclaiming that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Once he had left, the gravity of what had occurred struck me hard. I was shaken, embarrassed, and scared. This was the man I had once planned to spend my life with, now turned into a stranger I could hardly recognize or reason with. The realization that this was his true nature, hidden beneath his outward charm, was profoundly heartbreaking. After the incident, I was overwhelmed with guilt, incessantly apologizing to my friend and the man who had intervened, even though they reassured me repeatedly that none of this was my fault. The idea haunted me that if I hadn't been there, my friend's birthday would have proceeded smoothly without the chaos caused by Henry. She assured me that in time, we might find a way to look back on the incident with some semblance of humor, but at that moment, the thought seemed impossible. In the following days, as I processed the event, I spoke with my parents and my lawyer, who both confirmed that this latest outburst was further proof that I was right to end the marriage. It was clear that Henry was not only struggling to accept the impending divorce, but was also becoming increasingly unstable, prompting concerns for my safety. With resolve, I decided it was time to stop excusing his behavior. I reached out to Henry's mother directly, no longer willing to gloss over the issues. I reminded her of all the times I had overlooked their erratic actions for the sake of our marriage, but I expressed firmly that my patience had ended. I made it clear to her that if Henry or anyone from his family kept bothering me, I would be forced to seek a restraining order. Over the phone, I could sense her anger, but I stood my ground. I reminded her how they always boasted about Henry's high-profile job and warned that he could lose it quickly if a restraining order were filed against him by his wife. She became silent immediately. I wasn't finished, though. I emphasized that it was in everyone's best interest for Henry to sign the divorce papers and move on. I had ample evidence to take legal action if they continued to press the issue, and I was fully prepared to do so after all I had endured. After a lengthy silence, she spoke again with a tone that had softened considerably. She suggested that perhaps we could resolve things amicably, but I dismissed the idea. There was nothing left to resolve. The marriage was done, and the sooner they accepted it, the better for everyone involved. I ended the call feeling a mix of relief and tiredness. It was liberating to finally confront them and assert that I would no longer tolerate being bullied. Shortly after our conversation, Henry signed the divorce papers, seemingly realizing that he could lose everything important to him and his family if they didn't face reality. My lawyer is now handling all the necessary paperwork, and I am starting to close this painful chapter of my life. The quiet that has followed feels like a profound relief. I want to express my gratitude to everyone here for their support. When I first shared my situation, I was fearful and uncertain, but the advice, encouragement, and kindness from this community have empowered me. I'm optimistic about the future and confident that, with this support, I can handle whatever comes my way.